Chad Morrison from SMU looking to resurrect the Arkansas football program in the vaunted SEC Western Division. Mark Rogers TV. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for smart college football analysis. We bring in Andrew Hutchinson. He does his work at Hogs 247 Sports. Andrew, I appreciate you jumping on board. How you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing good, Mark. How about you?
I'm doing great. Appreciate the time here, and I'd like to dive into this recruiting class first and foremost because everyone seems to think that their team should be a top 10 program or a top 20 recruiting class, and they get caught up in the numbers and the star rankings and all of that. And if any Arkansas fans are locked into that, they're not necessarily impressed. The last rated class in the SEC, according to 247's composite, and number 49 in the nation. But I think you can probably shed some light in regards to, with 2 4-stars and 15 3-stars, what might be the bright spots in this recruiting class.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it right there, last in the SEC and 49th in the country. You think, oh, it's not a very good class, but I think what some people fail to realize is that it was a small class. Arkansas only signed 17 players, and that's always going to hurt your recruiting rankings. Unless you're Alabama and signing 15 5-stars or something like that, you're going to be down the list a little bit. But Arkansas did sign some good players, especially considering Chad Morris came in and only had about 61 days from the date he was hired till signing day to put together a class. And you got the 2 4-stars are Connor Noland, a quarterback from Greenwood, Arkansas, and Bumper Poole, a linebacker from Texas, the Dallas area, Lovejoy High School. So those 2 guys are very talented, but several 3-stars are probably going to come in and play immediately. A couple of junior college guys, Dorian Gerald, 3-star defensive end, kind of surprised people when he picked Arkansas over Texas A&M on Friday. That was a really great way for Arkansas to finish the class. He's a guy that could come in and contribute right there at the defensive end in John Chavis's system. And then also another junior college guy in running back, Rakeem Boyd, who originally signed with Texas A&M coming out of high school, but ended up going to junior college for 1 year, and now he's coming to Arkansas and going to join a pretty crowded running back group at Arkansas. But I think both those guys have an immediate impact ability in 2018.
Yeah, Gerald is the top rated at his position, and the running back Boyd is in the top 5. So 2 good junior college transfers for Chad Morris and company, and a way to jumpstart the program is to go the JUCO ranks. Anybody else in these 17 recruits that kind of jumps off the page for you? Because as you kind of alluded to, Andrew, we get so locked into the 5-stars and the 4-stars. First of all, there's like 35 stars walking around. There's not a whole lot of those guys. The 4-stars, there's about 400. But the bulk of even the elite programs that are vying for conference championships are built on 3-star talent. And we've got superstars all over the place that were 3-stars. Anybody, based on what you've seen on videotape or just based on the information that you've gathered, that kind of excites you?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll start in with Andrew Parker. He's a low 3-star linebacker from the New Orleans area. He's a guy that really no one knew about. When Arkansas started recruiting him, his only offers were like Georgetown, McNeese State, a couple of FCS schools, and then Louisiana Lafayette. So when Arkansas started recruiting him, fans were like, oh man, why in the world is Arkansas going after this guy? Well, John Chavis went after him. He's a guy that John Chavis found and discovered. He came in for an official visit, committed to Arkansas, and then just a few days after committing to Arkansas, all of a sudden Texas offers him. Texas A&M offers him. TCU, Ole Miss offered him the day before National Signing Day. And so a lot of fans were really worried there at the very end that he was going to leave and go to Texas, where he took an official visit the last weekend before National Signing Day. And he's a guy that he surprised everybody when he came to Arkansas, stuck with Arkansas. But he's a guy that could come in and play right away. He's a linebacker that John Chavis, we talked to him on Wednesday, and he said that we don't recruit guys unless we see NFL potential in them. And so for that's pretty high praise for a guy that's been around the SEC for 20 some odd years. So I think he's a guy that I'm excited about. But then they also signed several more higher rated guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball, a couple of really talented safeties. Joseph Fouché. I'm not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he's also from the New Orleans area. And then also Miles Mason from Alabama. He was previously committed to Mississippi State, got him on board. I think those two guys also have a potential to play really early just because of the safety depth at Arkansas. A couple of safeties, senior safeties from last year have moved on and really don't have much depth there. So I think you could see those guys on the field early as well. So there's a lot of depth, especially on the defensive side of the ball. There are good pieces on the offensive side, including Michael Woods, a wide receiver, who was previously committed to SMU. But I really think the defensive side of the ball is where Arkansas addressed some major needs right away.
Talking Arkansas football with Andrew Hutchinson. You can join him on Hogs 247 Sports, of course, the standard for college football recruiting. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel for the video versions, and the audio versions you can find at Podbean, Stitcher, and iTunes. So you mentioned a couple guys coming from Alabama. In some of the research that I did, it seems like Chad Morris is sticking to his roots that he's developed there at SMU. And it looks like the staff was really headed toward staying in Texas. Obviously, the wealth of talent and the volume of talent is huge. Oklahoma, and of course in Arkansas and Louisiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Chad Morris is a high school coaching legend in Texas. Won several state championships there at Lake Travis and Austin. Some of the guys that are on his staff, running backs coach Jeff Traylor is another guy that has really deep high school coaching roots in Texas, and that was their where they went to get guys at SMU. So Texas is a place where Arkansas has traditionally recruited well. The previous staff really didn't do a great job, and I think that was one of Brett Bielema's downfalls here at Arkansas because they didn't recruit Texas. And early in his tenure, there was a big story when he made the comment about the style of play in Texas. He kind of made some comments that kind of downgraded the play, the no huddle offense, that kind of thing. And I think that really hurt Arkansas and Texas recruiting. And Chad Morris is trying to go ahead and fix that. That's the main. Texas and then Arkansas, of course, are the main places where he wants to recruit, but also the footprint that he's mentioned is going down into Louisiana, getting a few guys, going over to Oklahoma, getting some guys. And, honestly, Memphis is in Tennessee and Tulsa is in Oklahoma, but Chad Morris has said those are in-state areas for Arkansas. They need to go over there and treat them as if they were in the borders of Arkansas. And, they went into Tulsa and got Cortre Alexander, a defensive end who Texas was recruiting, went into Memphis and got Ryan Winkle, an offensive lineman that Mississippi State and Tennessee were recruiting. So they did some good job getting in their footprint in year one, and I expect it to even be more pronounced in 2019.
Hey, Andrew, since you brought up Brett Bielema, I would be curious to get your take on what ultimately went wrong, because, of course, he comes in from Wisconsin. They break the bank for him. He has a rough first season, which was anticipated, so no big deal there. They go winless in the SEC. They were headed toward a second winless season in the SEC. Then he gets the big turnaround with wins against LSU and Ole Miss that were highly ranked at the time. Finishes that second season off strong. Then he starts to go to bowl games, wins 7 games, wins 8 games, and he improves his win total each and every year. Then the end of that 2016 season, at a point in which with about 3 or 4 games left, it looked like they were going to once again improve on a decent season and finish in the top 25 after they had won a couple bowl games. And then they just had that downer against a bad Missouri team. They blow the 24-7 lead. They go to the bowl game. They blow another huge lead against Virginia Tech. And then it all seemed to come unraveled here in 2017.
Yeah, you hit it right there. I mean, it was a steady incline. And then when you get to that Missouri game, it just fell off completely. I mean, it was a dramatic decline. The Virginia Tech game, the Belk Bowl, that was the largest lead Arkansas has ever blown in school history. So not a good way to end the year. Really, where I think it started going wrong is when Arkansas lost offensive line coach Sam Pittman to Georgia. He's a guy that really helped Arkansas build what was arguably the best offensive line in the country. They got some high-quality guys like Dan Skipper, Denver Kirkland, Frank Ragnow, guys to come in and play offensive line that were very, very talented that Arkansas probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And they gave up the fewest sacks in the SEC for 3 straight years, Bielema's first 3 years, even the 2013 season when they only won 3 games, which is just incredible. And then they replaced Sam Pittman with a guy named Kurt Anderson, who was an assistant offensive line coach for the Buffalo Bills. And, I gave him a chance, but it was just such a dramatic drop off to the next year because Arkansas was last, gave up more sacks in the SEC over the last 2 years than any other team in the conference. So just that alone, Austin Allen was a pretty good quarterback for Arkansas, but he just never had any time to find receivers, and he always got hit and he got banged up, and then confidence starts to go away. So I think that was a major thing. Also, I think defensive recruiting really struggled under Bielema. I actually wrote a piece yesterday about the recruiting during Bielema's tenure. They signed, I think, 21 or so low 3-star recruits during his tenure, and a lot of those guys, just transferred out or have just been, special teams guys, and you need those guys, but you also need the depth at Arkansas. And I think that if they had more depth on defense, you maybe wouldn't have seen some of the second half collapses. We mentioned Missouri and Virginia Tech in the 2016 season, but those collapses were a common theme throughout Bielema's tenure, and as well as not being able to come back from halftime deficits. They lost their first 18 games when they were trailing by halftime before coming back to beat a bad Ole Miss team this past season. So a lot of those things kind of, I think, were intertwined. And I think that really with losing Sam Pittman and not recruiting the depth needed on defense to compete in the SEC on a consistent basis were really the things that did Bielema in.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's coming together as a perfect storm or an imperfect storm when you've got depth issues, and then you combine that with everybody gets hit with injuries, but Arkansas got hit with more injuries than the average team, certainly this past season. And if you've got depth issues and get hit with more injuries than most teams, then it's spells trouble. We got Andrew Hutchinson on the line from Hogs 247 Sports, so please join him right there. Look him up on Twitter as well. He's a wealth of knowledge concerning the Arkansas Razorbacks. So you bring in a new head coach, and obviously he's going to turn over the coaching staff, and thus is the case here. Now, the one headliner is, of course, John Chavis, their defensive coordinator, heading up the defense. But if you could just kind of sift through the offensive and defensive staffs, obviously much of that has come with Chad Morris from SMU, and just your initial thoughts about this coaching staff.
Yeah, a lot of the offensive staff came with Chad Morris, and it's a lot of guys that most of them are date back to his tenure at Clemson when he was the offensive coordinator for the Tigers and Clemson, and really kind of helped build Clemson into being the national title contender that they are today. You've got Dustin Fry as the offensive line coach. Joe Craddock is the offensive coordinator. Jeff Traylor, he's actually one that joined him at SMU. He was previously on Charlie Strong's staff at Texas. He's the running backs coach. You've got the wide receivers coach is Justin Stepp. And then one of the holdovers from the previous staff is Barry Lunny Jr., the tight ends coach. He's a guy that I really like him. He's a guy that played quarterback at Arkansas. He's got a lot of ties inside the state. He was an assistant coach for his dad at the high school ranks in the largest classification in Arkansas for, I think, the better part of a decade. So that's the offensive staff. It's a lot of younger guys. There's not really any old guys on that staff. They're very young. They're very active on social media, which is big with the recruits. They hit the road hard. They don't ever stop. I mean, it's unbelievable how much they're on the road, more so than the previous staff. Then on the defensive side, it's mostly new guys. You've got one holdover in defensive line coach John Scott Jr. He's a guy that was only here for his 2017 was his first year at Arkansas. Didn't necessarily have as much success as he probably would have liked to, but it's kind of hard when you've got those depth issues that we just talked about. Another defensive line coach that they brought in is a guy that Arkansas fans will remember, in Steve Caldwell. He actually was a defensive line coach during the Bobby Petrino era. Then he left and came back. I think he was most recently at Boise State. Then in the secondary, you've got Ron Cooper, who was with Chavis at Texas A&M, and then also Mark Smith, who's another guy that followed Chad Morris over from SMU. He was actually the director of recruiting or something like that, one of those titles over there, and is promoted to one of the he's kind of like the 10th assistant coach that was added this offseason. And then obviously John Chavis will be the defensive coordinator and also coach linebackers. I think John Chavis, his reputation is as one of the best defensive coordinators in football. Obviously, he didn't exactly have as much success as he would have liked at Texas A&M. But what he did at Tennessee and what he did at LSU is, it speaks for itself. So it's going to be, and I think also just having a new job, kind of reinvigorated him. There was a lot of concerns that John Chavis, being an older guy, maybe wouldn't be as active on the recruiting trail. He couldn't recruit. There were a lot of concerns on message boards and things like that about that. But I think he's done away with those concerns this offseason with what he was able to put together on defense in this signing class. So I think overall it's a class that's going to recruit. Chad Morris has said during his one or his first or second press conference that he's not going to hire an assistant if they aren't going to recruit. And if they don't recruit, if they don't produce on the recruiting trail, they're going to be gone. So I think that's an expectation and something good for Arkansas, because at Arkansas, you're not going to get 5 stars knocking down your door to come play for you. You're going to have to go and you're going to have to get guys and convince them, hey, please come visit us, check us out, see what we got, and then go from there. Because once you get them on campus, I think your recruits are typically pleasantly surprised from what they see. Arkansas's got this reputation of being, redneck and everything. People are worried. I think I've heard stories of coaches telling recruits, you don't want to go there because there might be a cow on the runway or anything like that. And that's just not the case. And so if you get the recruits here to visit Arkansas, then you got a chance. You got a fighting chance. They're not all going to come to Arkansas, but they're going to consider them probably more than they would, if they didn't. And of course, the only way you get them here is if you recruit them hard. And I think that's what this staff is going to do.
Yeah, you certainly want assistant coaches that can teach the game, who are teachers and instructors. But if you get another guy who's maybe that less of a teacher instructor, but he's that much better of a recruiter, you need the talent on the field, and you can survive maybe a guy that's a little bit lesser of a coach on the field, but man, can really bring in the recruits and build those relationships, because that's, of course, what it's all about. Got to tell you, Andrew, that I covered the SEC, specifically Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama in the late 90s. So as soon as I saw the name Barry Lunney, I thought quarterback prior to Clint Sterner, if I'm remembering correctly, there with the Hogs.
Yep.
All right. We're joined by Andrew Hutchinson. He's getting us caught up on Arkansas football following the hire of Chad Morris, of course, and the National Signing Day, number 14 in the SEC, 49th in the nation, according to the 247 composite. You can join Andrew at Hogs 247 Sports. So you alluded to Connor Noland, who was the number 2 rated quarterback and player in the state of Arkansas. Jerry Bohannon went to Baylor. It was kind of a perfect fit because they are totally void of quarterbacks there at Baylor under Matt Rule, with only like 1 or 2 on scholarship. Austin Allen, of course, had some issues with the offensive line and protection, but when he did get time to throw, almost 3,500 yards and 25 touchdown passes 2 seasons ago. So what are we looking at here entering the spring? Probably an open competition, basically.
Absolutely. With the new coach coming in, it's obviously going to be an open competition. It's hard to say that Cole Kelly doesn't have the advantage right now just because he had some starting experience. Austin Allen got hurt there in the second half of the season and missed 4 games, and Cole Kelly was the guy who started in his place. He's a big 6'7" Cajun from Louisiana, and he's a gunslinger. He has an arm that is as good as anybody I've seen. He has a cannon. Now that sometimes gets him in trouble. Sometimes he tries to make throws that aren't there, or he fires in a fastball on a slant route and everything. Receivers don't typically like that, but he has the talent there. He's also a little bit more mobile than you'd probably expect for a guy his size. I mean, he is 6'7", 250 pounds, something like that. He is a big guy. He actually was used in some kind of short yardage goal line packages earlier in the season. So he's probably got the advantage right now. The other scholarship quarterbacks that are going to go through spring practice that are on campus already are Ty Story. He's actually a year older than Cole. He's from Arkansas. He grew up cheering for the Razorbacks and everything. He was a backup in 2016, got limited reps. I think he's thrown 4 passes in his career. So he's talented. He was a 4-star recruit, but he just hasn't necessarily developed as the previous coaching staff would have liked. But who knows with a new coaching staff coming in, especially with an offensive guru like Chad Morris, who knows what he could do. Dalton Hyatt is another guy. He redshirted this past year, and he's from Alabama. So those three are the scholarship guys that are going to go through spring practice, which obviously gives them an advantage. You've got a couple of walk-ons, and you've also got an interesting walk-on in Austin Ani, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He's a walk-on who actually came out. He was a part of the 2012 class and actually signed with TCU, but he was also a very good baseball player. He ended up being a second-round draft pick by the New York Yankees and spent the past 6 years playing baseball. And he said, hey, let me, I'm going to try to pick up football again. And so he's actually already on campus and going through workouts, and we'll go through spring as well. So who knows? Maybe he could be a Brandon Whedon type. But honestly, I think Cole Kelly is going to have the advantage just to start the spring. And then you've also got to add Connor Nolan and join. Unless you're Tua Tago, whatever his name was for Alabama that won a national championship. It's I think it's going to be Cole Kelly to start the season, but it's an open competition.
Hey, Andrew, for some younger fans out there or anybody who's really not locked into the history of Arkansas football, they might be surprised how successful this football program's been down through the ages. Has won a national championship, has competed at the highest levels, of course, coming over from the old Southwest Conference in 1991 or two to the SEC, even under Houston Nutt, more in recent years, finishing in the top 10 to 15 in the country a couple times, going to a couple SEC championship games. So it looked like Brett Bielema might be on the cusp of competing for better bowl games and possibly an SEC West. That obviously didn't happen. The program takes a step back. Of course, it's going to take Chad Morris some time. But what do you think is realistic at Arkansas? What should the fans expect long term?
I've been asked that a million times, and I try to think about it and ponder it. And I think it's not, unrealistic to think Arkansas should be in a bowl game every year. There's going to be some 6-6 years mixed in there, which fans aren't exactly excited about because you're stuck playing in the Independence Bowl or the Birmingham Bowl or something like that. It's not too flashy. But I think you should also have some years mixed in there where you're competing for an SEC West title. I don't think it's fair to say Arkansas should be like Alabama or LSU where they're competing for a national championship year in, year out. I think it should be something where it happens every now and then, kind of like what Houston Nutt did during his tenure. In 98, they were in his first year, they were right there in the mix of things, until the Clint Sterner fumble against Tennessee, top 10 team. You had an SEC West title in 2002, I believe it was. You won the SEC West in 2006 when you had Darren McFadden. So, I mean, it's kind of like, every 5 years or so, you should be, in the top 10 nationally, competing for a potential national championship. Because when you're competing for the SEC championship, you're competing for a spot in the college football playoffs. So I think that would be, realistic for Arkansas fans. And, if you can average 6 or 7 wins, or maybe, get up to 8, 9 every now and then, I think it should be a cyclical thing. I don't think they should be winning double-digit games every year. Arkansas fans would love that, but I think it's more of a cyclical thing where you've got, a progression, from a 6-win team to a 7-win team to an occasional 10 or 11, 12-win team. So it's hard to win in Arkansas. I mean, it's been done in the past, as you mentioned, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But it's the SEC is a whole nother ball game, and when you got Alabama and Nick Saban in your division, it's going to be hard.
All right, Andrew Hutchinson from Hogs 247 Sports, delivering a ton of insight and information on Arkansas football. So please join him right there. Andrew, first time on Mark Rogers TV. Hopefully we can have you back, maybe set up some spring football, but we appreciate the time.
Absolutely. I'd love to come on anytime.